Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is Discerning What is True. Today is the second day of December 2023, as the last month of the year of 2023. My channel is Discerning What is True, and I'm actually live on StreamYard, sorry, not StreamYard, but YouTube, and also Facebook and Odyssey. Going to be reading a particular book. This will be part two of the works by Alvin Boyd Kuhn, Kuhn, The Root of All Religions. And so I hope that you have ears to hear, eyes to see, and a heart to tell what is true and what is false. Thank you for being here. This section starts out with here that says the elder brothers in the great allegory of the prodigal son, and deploying her energies out from the heart of her being in creative activity, nature has rejected six impulses of her life, or into the field of space, according to the esoteric teachings of the sages. The first three of these have been expended, that is, in preliminary operations upon the pure, that is, root of matter, uh, multa propconcretia, in the process of process of bringing it forth from sheer potentiality through these successive stages in the form of height, Hyle, are substance palatable to this stage, to the sense of man. The primal ingredients of the, primal ingredients of being had undergone three subtle transformations of the hands of elementary energy before they arrive at the state of atomic structure to which we ascribe the name of matter. It was as each stage equally matter, but organically differential by degrees of subsidies of ether reality, talking about the ether here. The fourth impulse of force brought into a constant form and atomic constitution as the mineral element. The fifth was lifted it to the level of the vegetable kingdom, expressing rudimentary sense, and the sixth wave carried it forward to the freer expressions in animal bodies. Here, the mobile energies locked in matter had expended their force and had to wait then for the consummation of their cycle of seven-note gamut of forces by the introduction from above of the seventh tone that generated by the cosmic mental imagination. Note, let me just say some things here, folks. 7 is a very critical number. You have 7 chakras. You have 7 notes in music. There are other ones. I'm just like this right now, drawing a blank, but there are many. It's almost a hint about what life is like here on this planet, so to speak. And so we tend to miss that many times, if you know what I'm saying. Um, and there's other numbers such as 12 is important also. And we have 7 planets, you see. So these numbers are critical for us if we would just begin to, we take these things for granted. And at one time, I think in the past, we had 7 senses, like we have 5 senses. We lost 2 of them. And I like to find out, sometime I'll have to ask Phil Langdon about that, because Phil probably would know that, although I haven't heard him say, he said something about it in the last couple of times we've met. But the key is simply is that we have only 5 senses, but at one time we had 7, you see. Let's continue what we're reading here. See. Intelligence in which she would give birth later in the womb of her maternity body. The prodigy of this wedlock between Father Spirit and Mother Nature was to be the sons of God, or man, the potential God. Hear that? The potential to be gods. That's who we are. We have the opportunity to be that way. And one of the stages is being an angel. And that's what the Bill Langdon speaks about sometimes. He's an angel. This is the gist of all religion, philosophy, ethics, psychology, anthropology, sociology, and the hidden meaning of all poetry, folklore, mythology, and literature. 6 waves had pushed up from below. See, we have 7 days in a week. Think about that also. From below, forming the natural man or the first Adam, whom Paul describes as a living soul, a man of earth, earthly. The 7th wave was a descent of force from above, as Jesus told his disciples, and this was the Lord from heaven, or the second Adam, whom Paul differentiates as the quickening spirit. This was the spiritual man, or the God in man. Hence, the 7th principle was the Messiah. Heralded in the sacred books of not only the Jews, but all other sons of God. But all other nations. The Messianic hope of the world was based on the teachings of the archaic wisdom to the effect that the born sons of God were to be the product of 6 minor cycles of cosmic creation on this earth. The 7th emanation coming to crown the work of the first 6 was to apotheoze the natural humanity, or take it across the span of the human stage from the summit of animality to the foothills of the divine uplands. It was to implant the Christ nature in the hearts of all mankind. Remember that the story about Jesus and all that is not reality. That is, it's a story. You see, we talk about Golgotha, the place of the skull. Well, that's where Jesus is at. That's where the Spirit is at, within us, all of us. That is what we call the pineal gland. And when there's certain things that take place in your life, when there's stillness in your life, sometimes you will actually have that light to actually come on within your pineal gland, and that's when you will begin to have the first act of ascension. You see, you will come to the recognition, and then later on you will have the Spirit also. Let's continue on. We have data concerning the majestic cosmic procedure in both the Greek and Egyptian books. In Plato's Timaeus, which should have instructed medieval European Christianity better than it did, in the famous speech of the Demiurge, or creative lord to the legions of Chimerus, in which they commissioned them, us that is, to descend to earth for their work of fabricating animals, that is, animated beings, he says. Whatever among these is immortal and divine. Yes, our bodies are not immortal. Our bodies are mortal, but our spirits are immortal. They never die, you see. Of these I myself will furnish the seed, and the beginning is your task to accomplish the rest, to weave together mortal and immortal natures. This is perhaps the most informative and enlightened passage to be found in all religious writings, and his intelligent reading should have saved the Christian movement from the miscarriage of the archaic knowledge as its inept hands. That Demiurge creation in the Timaeus is the charter of our religious life, and it should, as Carlyle would say, be inscribed on all walls, where it states the anthropologically constitution of man, compounded as he is of the 2 natures, carnal and spirit. Okay, so that's what's going on. There's a battle between the flesh and the spirit. You see, the spirit is the higher being. You see, within you, so to speak, and the carnal is your body. And you're tempted many times to do certain things because guess what? It's of the body. All right, and it's the body in a lot of ways is to actually bring you down. It's more than that, though. Just as a simplification. All religion would shine, translated with new meaning, if all knew that we are on earth to weave together mortal and immortal. I've said that, or sorry. Paul had told it as mortal must be put on the immortality. But the meaning disappeared in the vague realms of mysticism. Nobody told us that he was talking of anthropology. But the Egyptian mythology religion is even more explicit in delineating the anthropological situation, for it had embroiled the structure of this meaning in the very nature of the age-long Messiah. In the cults of Egypt, and the Christ principle was named for centuries. That is the Greek word meaning Imhotep, Imhotep. This name tells the story, for it, you, is divinity that comes. M is a preposition meaning with, and heptep meaning has more significance, two meanings, peace and seven. The phrase man, name, that is, might then be rendered in full, the divinity that comes seven to bring peace. So the Messiah was the seventh life impulse. And why the ministering of peace? Why was Jesus' advent in the Gospels announced by the angelical choirs as being bringing peace on earth? And why is he elsewhere called the Prince of Peace? For a very significant reason indeed. The six preceding forces had not been able to endow their highest creature with mind. Okay? They were not embodied in any being possessing mind, but without mind there was no governance or direction of their energies. They functioned below the status of intelligence, and therefore were uncontrolled. They swept forth on the creative impulse in unrestrained freedom. They clashed in elementary theory, Fury, and churned up the sea of primal matter until it was turned into a state of coagulation, figured by the substance called curds, Curds, and butter of the ancient Hindu symbolic narrative of creation. They engaged in the primeval war of the elements, which even modern science postulates as an inceptional stage of the world formation. The forces ran wild in their fiery convulsions of the mineral elements, that is, in the untamed exuberance of vegetable life, and finally in most savage forms in the war of tooth and claw, the immense struggle for existence in the animal kingdom. It is the wild raging of these six elementary forces that is typified by the storms of the sea in the Jonah story in the Old Testament and the stilling of the tempest by Jesus in the New Testament. These forces, having built up man's body, are still active in that segment of his life which lies below intellect, and there the war of elementary nature still rages, if not quieted and pacified by mind. How well St. Paul knew this is evident in his many passages in his epistles. He finds in himself two opposing natures, a law in his members which wars against the law of his mind. You see, the seventh principle in man's nature is the Christos, who came to bring peace to the warfare of the six mindless forces that have set raging the storms of instinctive ferocity and elementary passion upon the primal seed of life. The Christ in man to quell this tempest and to bring the animal fierceness to peace, order, and harmony by that power, as Paul describes it, wherewith he is able to subdue all things unto himself. Up to the advent of this Christly Messiah, earth has no king. There was no Lord of life on the globe, for Lord etymologically means lawgiver. And how could a lawgiver function without the faculty of mind, without knowledge, without reason or intelligence? The natural order awaited his king. The true origin of this word king now comes to light. It is derived from the great Egyptian symbol for life, the Anki, Ankh. It means immortality, life, and time. You see, why life and time? Because no life is possible until two energies, positive and negative, spirit and matter, are tied together. So this is why you hear, Shakti and I get these things always confused. There are two S's here, Shakti and Shinti, or something of that nature. But one represents one is still, the other one is what we call still, which is is stillness. And the other one is matter, always moving. You see, always going around, such and such. And the matter part deals with the feminine energy, and the one is still is what we call the masculine energy. All this is tied with the men and women. This is another thing. That's why most people don't see the spiritual significance of basically getting married, so to speak, being a husband and wife, so to speak, because that in reality is supposed to, in some ways, if there was what I would call both sides understood the spiritual implications, that would be with a marriage of a man and woman would cause in some ways in a physical nature, but it also would be simply to look at it deeper as a spiritual nature also. The principle of intellect that is the ruler of energies below it, the king over life, is the product of the tying together of the mortal or animal nature and the immortal or divine self in the evolutionary career of man. The 6 aeons had prepared life on earth to receive its king, and nature stood in awe awaiting his event, his epiphany, his showing forth in Israel. The Mess, M-E-S-S, of Messiah, the Mas of Christmas, are from the same Egyptian word root that is mes, M-E-S, to be born. The world is solemnly still in this lay to welcome the birth of his king, the Christ in man, and how magnificent we find just this meaning voiced in the words of the grand old Christmas hymn, Joy to the World. Continue. The song here says the first verse of which runs, joy to the world, the Lord is come. And remember, the Lord is come. It's not an outward manifestation here, folks. It's just a story and what's supposed to take place in your head. You see. Let earth receive her king. Let every heart prepare him soon room. And heaven and nature sing. And heaven and nature sing, meaning earth will sing also. And the bringing together the two. But the problem is simply is we've been told that there's a physical Jesus. When these are not, these are all stories, but they're talking about spiritual issues, deeper issues than the what I would call literal. Literal is when you look at the scriptures, literal is dead. That's what it does. It kills the word. It kills the word. It has to have spirit in it. You see, the import of the first 2 lines we have already delineated. The significance of the truth in the third line is of such weight and scope that it makes well hold in the meaning of the future faith of Christianity, where it hints at the central truth of all dogma, that the Christ is an element in the psychological constitution of every son of man. We all are what we call son of men, and not an individual figure in history. Each evolved animal standing at the threshold of human ordination was to receive a divine guest. That guest is in your head. It's up here. You see, God is in you, but you must come to recognition that he is in you. And this isn't based upon some belief. It has to take some type of event in your life to take place, you see. And that's all to do with a lot to do with stillness, which is one of the hardest things for people to do, you see. And the older you get, it's harder because you worry about a lot of things in your life, this and that and everything else. So you're not still in your head. Anyway, to share life with him under the same fleshly roof in the same physical tabernacle, and his adoption of this guest as an integrate element of his own nature was to humanize him first and divinize him later. His rejection of the guest would involve him in evolutionary consequences of the gravest moment. And the 4th line contains another most suggestive reminder of the arcane knowledge as it speaks of the united jubilation of heaven and nature over the advent of deity to earth. It is not mere poetic accident that has so often joined the choirs of heaven and earth in Christmas and Eastern chorals. The event of the incarnation of soul is in flesh most intimately concerned the entire evolutionary destiny of both the citizenry of heaven and the designers of earth. For the celestial host was the cyclical opportunity to take their next step in the advance of to higher reaches of divinity. For the animal orders, it was the coming of the gift of mind into a kingdom lying one whole grade higher than their own. A universal jubilee of song is not too great a paean of exaltation in view of the magnificent import of this aeonic event, an exhortation of simply, joyful all you nations rise, join the triumph of the skies, with the angelical host proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem, and none too bombastically a call for mortal man to arise and hail his approaching divinity. Veiled in flesh, the Godhead see, hail the incarnated deity, born to raise the sons of earth, born to give them second birth. The second birth takes place up here. Risen with healing in his wings, light and life to all he brings. Hail the Son, S-U-N, of righteousness. Hail the heaven-born Prince of Peace. Significantly, in relations to the characterization of deity as the Son, S-U-N, an ancient text from Egypt states, the framer made the creation 6 in number, and for the 7th, he threw into the midst the fire of the sun, S-U-N. Evolution was to receive its crown in the fabrication of a creature endowed with the seed of divine intelligence. Earth and heaven were summoned to come hither and exalt together. For mine was sown for the first time on earth. Let me just make a point here, folks. This is something that's so critical. Everybody poo-poos the mind. Everybody in the age that we live in poo-poo mind, M-I-N-D. They don't think it's important that you use your brain. You see, most people have gone to the other extreme. They've gone to what I would call the emotions. There's nothing wrong with emotions unless you let them rule over you. You see, you can be happy one day and you can be sad the next day, so to speak. And what he's trying to say here simply is we don't want to think anymore. We don't want to contemplate anymore because we think it's hard. So we don't strive. We don't strive to enter in. And that's what it means to enter in. The multitudinous seeds of collective human and divine capacity were scattered abroad among the inhabitants of earth. Affirms Jesus, I came to send fire upon the earth. And the 7 angels in Revelation poured out the fiery contents of their censers over the earth. That's not about, guess what? It has nothing to do with tribulation. It has nothing to do with punishment. But the soothsayers, the teachers of our day, the preachers are looking at it literal. And that's not what it's about. It has nothing to do with that. So continue. Affirms Jesus, I came to send. Okay, I already said. And the 7 angels of Revelation poured out the fiery contents of their censers over the earth. And people think that this is God's judgment. Why would God punish people? Come on, folks, think. Why would God, who created you, punish you? It's a basic question you must ask. Why the Creator, that is God, created you in his own image, why would he punish you? Who gave you that idea? That's all I heard when I went to church. All this, what do you call it? Shame, blame, and guilt. That didn't come from God. Never has. That's men. That's men who want to rule over you. Men want to continue to control you, to take money from you, who lie to you. Why would God punish his own people? After all of us are created in his image. That counts white, black, yellow, red, all that. Why would God punish his own people? Why would God? There is no such thing as hell. Hell is right here on this planet. It's where your training ground is to grow up. That's what it's about. It's almost in some ways to make you so terrified you actually look for other answers in what's going on around you. That's what it's about. It isn't for punishment, it's to get your attention. But yet, you're these stupid people who teach this literal interpretation of scriptures cause harm to people. They lead people astray. No wonder people don't go to church anymore. Why would you? Anyway, Prometheus, Lucifer the Messiah, came to bring the light of mind that was to lighten the Gentiles, the first Adamite men, and yet so enlighten them, and to be the glory of his people Israel, those thus spiritually endowed, that true light that lighteth every man that cometh in the world. The people, Israel is not a physical country, folks. Has nothing to do with that. Those are the people of God. If you buy into literalism, you'll never see this truth. You never will. And people, I can remember so many thoughts from these preachers that I went under. Oh, you're going to go to hell. You mess with that stuff, the devil. The devil's into, just he's such and such. But the legions of junior gods, that is Plato, Communius, Asusiorus, and Innocence, divas of the intellectual order, but untried in material embodiment, came down under a obligation, indeed a covenant, sealed with broad oaths, we are told, to tutor and the animal race. Only in the light of the evolutionary situation here portrayed can the famous, quote unquote, covenant between Jehovah and Israel in the Old Testament be clearly envisioned. Again, Israel is the people of God. It is not, Jews is another word for people of God. It is not a country. We swore on our part to spiritualize the animal and return to our ecclesiastic home without becoming enmeshed in the mire of animal sensualization. The lower life being typed by water, the Christ's ability, that is the Christ's ability to walk on the water without sinking into a clutching depths, were allegorized by the Jesus miracle of sea walking. On his part, the eternal promise that we should never be dissolved. That is it's from the writings of Timonius. This is the pledge of our immortality, matching the rainbow sign of no further destruction after the deluge. So it's just we've had a number done on us because there are men that basically who know nothing, who become educated and teaching something that they really basically are just reading out what they've been taught. Preachers, priests, all these men such and such are deceiving people because they're looking at scripture in a literal interpretation. So the King of Glory came in to shed his intellectual light over the areas of human consciousness. He was given dominion over the beasts of the field, the fish of the sea, and the fowls of the air. So what is he speaking of here? Well, it says given dominion over the beasts of the field, so that's probably dealing with the earth. The fish of the sea is dealing with water, and the fowls of the air. So there's all to do with the four elements, although he speaks only, looks like three elements here, the air, water, and earth, or all the orders of life below his status. All things were put under his feet. But the true sense of our ruling the beasts of the field has never been set forth in theology. Literalism here, as elsewhere, has ruined anthropology meaning. It's taken a little, these statements would mean that we humans are to go out and establish governments over tigers and elephants and scorpions and boa constrictors and cobras, and not to forget trained seals and fleas. But this is childish. It's just ridiculous, folks. Though not more so than the bulk of interpretation based on ignorant literalism of poetic figuration. You see, what it means is an aspect of anthropology that brings the truth home to us with realistic force. The animal nature that we are to bend into harmony is the lower half of our own constitution. In ourselves is the tiger, is the scorpion, the gnat that claws and stings and torments. We are to govern the animal in ourselves. After this, Plato added simply, he, the Demiurgus, that is the one, we'll go into that sometime, we'll talk about it. It's a very deep subject, who is to consider the creator, likewise commanded us to govern as much as possible in the best and most beautiful manner the mortal animal, that it might not become the cause of evil to itself. According to body, it is an animal, but according to intellect, a god. Or this particle animal, which suspended from a mortal soul, consists of soul and body. That which the psychologists call our subconscious mind is just the mind of the animal in whose fleshy house we are tenants. I had something I want to say here, and I kind of dropped it. Kind of frustrated by that. See, we're just one rung above the animal, you see, and we have a body, but we have a head. Now, why would anything take place in our lives that actually is more heavenly? Your head is the air part. You understand that? It's the highest part of your head. Okay, your body. I'm so sorry. It's the highest part of your body. Your head. It's who you think about, what you think about. It's how you think. It's how you know who you are and if you're alive. You see, it's in the air. Your feet are on the earth, you see, but your head is in the air. It's above all things on your body. It's above all else is your head. That is heaven. Heaven is within you, in your head. Let's see where I've lost my part here. Yeah, I've lost it here. Isaiah has a beautiful description of the Messianic nature. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son, S-O-N, is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of the government and peace there shall be no end. Why? Wonderful. Because to the dull sense of the lower animal man, the exhibition of the first use of mind, reason, and inference and prediction by the new guest would appear marvelous beyond comprehensive. Counselor, because the divinity came to tutor, and his position was advisory. Lurking in the background of consciousness, he was to advance the intimidation of consciousness and implant the ought side, ought sense, O-U-G-H, ought to do this sense. The mighty God, the being on any other upper plane, are the gods to those beneath. We have seen the reference of the term Prince of Peace, assuming responsibility under the covenant. He bore the government upon his shoulder, and once established in the human constitution, the kingdom of spirit is everlasting. The Egyptian denominated this word Tatu, T-A-T-T-U, quote, the place of establishment forever. Values established here in soul quality are never dissolved. The soul is indestructible. It gives us immortality. And now we face the fact of the most not realism in the whole matter. To perform their work as commissioned, it was necessary in nature's scheme that the souls of these angels should be incorporated in the physical bodies of the animal races they were to divinize. The phrase, I shall dwell with them, is to be taken in a sense for more physiological, literal than religious have ever dreamed of. Quote, the imitations of this situation for intelligent study of totemism, T-O-T-E-M-I-S-M, will suggest themselves to the discerning student. The Greek descent of the soul the theological fall of the angels and the biblical going down in Egypt, Egypt being a glyph for earth and body, also the far country of the prodigal son allegory, are not grasped in their interior sense until we accept the incarnation as the collective spiritual ensouling of the animal races on the globe. We have assembling a body of data to substantiate this position that has not been gathered and focused on the point before. To begin with, the word I was trying to tell you was simply a cult. A cult is simply a mystery, folks. It's not of the devil, but that's how the churches look at it. That's how they've been to demonize what I would call that particular perspective, is to basically keep people from truth, you see. So when you say things like there was no Egypt, the story of the past simply is going down in Egypt. It's going down into the body, you see. The body, which is what we struggle with all the time. What do you think goes on, folks? I mean, think about what all the ads are about these days. You know, think about that in ads. Look around you. You know, women who are scantily dressed in a way is to quote unquote to deceive you, bring you down to the animal level. And advertisers use that very cleverly to get men to buy beer or whatever, you know, such and such. And I'm not talking about this whole idea of someplace how, you know, it's just a way of holding you down here. It's a weight, it's a burden, you see. It keeps you from actually getting to the air. You understand, rising up. We can see now why in the gospel presentation of Jesus was born in a stable among animals. That's a hint. Hercules, a Greek Jesus type, had to cleanse the Onican stable, that is, a glyph of the body polluted by the filth of animal nature. The Christ's function is to wash clean the corruption of the lower self, the animal, washed in the blood of the Lamb, purgation. The prodigal son descended to the animal level. Remember that? Eating the husk that the swine did eat. In other words, he got on the ground, you know, and ate like a pig. That brought him to the animal level. It's not literal. You see, it's pointing out how low man has gone. He's forgotten who he is. In Mark 1:13, there's a startling brief that unmistakably reference to the animal embodiment when it said in the condensed narrative of the temptation that during the 40 days he was in the wilderness, another glyph for this earth, Jesus was with the wild beasts. Indeed, that statement is the only item given to characterize the nature of the temptation. The meaning of this allegorical figure of temptation has been grossly misconceived simply because it has not been it has been known by exegesis that the word covers nothing but the incarnation itself. It is no sense difference from the meaning of the trial of Jesus. Our trial is the incarnation. Our trial is here, incarnated in this world. It is our testing. It would be difficult to speculate in the meaning of such a passage as Ezekiel chapter 32, in which it says, I will fill the beasts of the whole earth with thee, unless it be taken to refer to the collective incarnation of the soul in animal beings. You see, from the Chaldean oracles, we take this expression hint, the wild beasts of the earth shall inhabit thy vessel. You see, the flesh. It's the flesh. In Egypt, Osiris is addressed as the lifter up of wild animals. In the Apocalyptic Gospel, the epistles of Ignatius to the Romans, we find a remarkable passage which is only redeemed from other ineptness of meaning if we understand it in the light of our thesis. Suffer me to be food to the wild beasts, by whom I shall attain unto God. For I am the wheat of God, and I shall be ground by the teeth of the wild beast, that I may be found the pure bread of Christ. Wheat, broken, bruised, crushed into flour, and reunited into bread. The nourishment of animal man was a universal ancient symbol of the Christ nature, to be crucified, to be lacerated by his voluntary subjection to the lower personality, and the hint that the grinding was done between the teeth of wild animals is decisive as the reference to incarnation. Coming here, being on this planet. The fourth dimension was where we were. That's why it's the fall, because we're in 3D world here. That's the fall from 4D to 3D. The declaration that we are sent forth as sheep among wolves is another allusion to our animal residence. Then the vivid allegorism of Daniel in the lion's dens confronts us. The meaning is that the soul holds true to its spiritual nature. So when Daniel's within the lion's den, he's not dealing with what we call real lions. He's dealing with his own self. That is, how does he deal with his animal part of himself? How does he deal with those temptations to give in, to quit? And the beast will not harm us. It will take pages again to elucidate the deep meaning behind the custom of the grotesque masks, M-A-S-K-S, worn by roosters on Halloween. The masks were originally all animal faces or hides, H-I-D-E-S, and the buffoonity of the revelry was to portray all too realistically distortion and disfigurement of the soul's feature as it looked out through the eyes and body of the animal vestige. So what he's saying, some things, these things that take place at Halloween, or when you see certain, it used to be that way, was people dress up in animal costumes, would reveal what we really are in our flesh. You see. Then Alfred Tennyson has a strange verse, which proves that he was conversant with the hidden knowledge. God lent the house of a beast to the soul of the man, and the man said, "Am I your debtor?" And God said, "Make it as clean as you can, and then I will send you a better." But the most astonishing asseveration of our dwelling in the body of a beast is to be found in the first 5 chapters of the book of Daniel, in reference to the history of man's generically has been missed because, as always, typology was mistaken for personal history. The soul in man was ever typed under the character of a king. Hence, Daniel's address to King Nebuchadnezzar was not seen as spoken to the race collectively. The prophet, as the mouthpiece of deity, said, "You, O king, are king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given all dominion, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, he has put the wild animals and the birds of the air into your power and made you ruler over them all. You are the golden head." That's talking about you. You see? The sons of men, it should be noted, are the lower segments. The sons, it's not, he's got, Nebuchadnezzar is in caps. It's not in all caps, but it's a capital letter, okay? The sons of men is in lower caps. It should be noted are the lower segments of man's self, the animal human, in sharp distinction from the sons of God. The same classification as Gentiles and Israelites. Already shown. You see, the Gentiles were what we call the animals. The Israelites were the ones who had already ascended. The Gentiles were still in the flesh. They were still in the literalism. They're not. It's amazing. But anyway, this is important, for it yields the precise meaning which the evolutionary predicament postulates. That is, then Daniel likened the soul in his descent into the limitations of body to a tree stripped of its leafage, branches, and stem. In fact, hewed down, said, "Still leave the stump of its herbage, that is, herbage of the earth, with the animals. Let his mind cease to be human. Let an animal mind be given him, and let 7 years pass over him." The last is a reference to his running through 7 planes of nature, each one a eon, symbolized as a cosmic year, to complete the ever-ordained 7-fold cycle. A moment later, Daniel gives direct meaning to the metaphor by the declaration to the king, "Our soul, the tree is yourself." And here is the intimidation that is in the soul's descent. It is stripped of its outward evidence of its former growth and starts each new cycle from seed. Seed is very critical in Scripture, folks, very critical. Stump or internucleus in a flesh incarnation. Again, in chapter 4, the God voice pronounces the incarnation decree against the soul. The king, O king, you shall be driven away from human beings to dwell with the wild animals. You shall be forced to eat grass like cattle. Just like the prodigal son, you shall be drenched with the dews of heaven. The reference to water as the element of the lower life. And 7 years shall pass over you till you learn that the Most High reigns over the realm of men. The sentence was carried out instantly upon Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven away from human beings. He ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dews of heaven, and his nails grew like the claws of a bird. When the time was over, the soul itself, now speaking, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven. This is all spiritual. It has nothing to do with physical here, folks. Please see this. My reason returned unto me. Of course his reason came up because it's in heaven. It's his head. You reason up here. You don't reason down here. You reason up here. Down here, your sexual organs is to do with a lot to do with emotional impact, you see. But up here, you reason, okay? You got your noggin up here. You think, wait a minute, do I want to do this? You know, do I really love this particular person? Or am I just in it for my own self? This is all, just want you to understand something. Up here is reason. You think up here. You don't think down there. And I bless the Most High, praising him and honoring him forever. You come to revelation and simply see saw the truth. And briefly again in chapter 5, his mind was made like the mind of an animal, and his dwelling was with the wild beasts. So he forgot. Or did he? His mind was made like the mind of an animal, and his dwelling was with the wild beasts. Yeah. Disputants will rise into what I call votive gray, and this interpretation far overreaches itself as sheer presumption on our part. It is enough to answer that Bible material is allegorical, and that such a sentence, if executed upon a historical Nebuchadnezzar, becomes a laughable caricature of history. Also, no such conversion of this mortal king into a bird eating grass is recorded in his chapter. Of course not. Of course not. Makes no sense that a king suddenly is out here eating grass like a cow. It's talking about animal instincts. It's esoteric. As history, the story is ridiculous as a glip of anthropology history and a grand portrait of the truth. The Bible cannot be redeemed to a sense, S-E-N-S-E, acceptable by intelligence until it is interpreted by the keys of the ancient Arcanian. The soul principle embodying intelligence and spiritual will thus comes to earth to inaugurate a new order of life. It came to inject a new spirit through the function of a higher faculty, those whom the Bible calls the poor and the people. The Adamite, that is Adam's generation that was to be lifted up and divinized by the gift of nascent divinity, N-A-S-C-E-N-T. Divinity, it came to give evolution, crudely speaking, a new deal. A radical rebuilding was undertaken during which a cosmic announcement might have been displayed. With the legend that evolutionary business was going forward as usual during the alterations. With the transfer of the firm to new management, it came to revolt the old order to end the chaotic reign of the 6 elementary powers, to curb the rule of teeth and claw in the animal part of man, to open blind eyes to see the advantages and blessedness of fraternity instead of devastating warfare, to still the storm of savage passion over the sea of life, to bring the natural forces to a basis of order and harmony in the universe of man, as had been done when the sun, S-U-N, quote, the divinity of the solar system, was set in the midst of the chaotic world, WHIRL, of the planets. It came to instill the law of love, fulfilling all other laws into the nature of a race recently bestiality and predatory. So the Messiah announced a new dispensation on the basis of the ordinance that ye love one another. And as animals, we ate each other. Now we were to love one another. The lion and lamb in us to lie down in peace together. It's about us. It's not a true figurative lion or a lamb. It is all esoteric. It's all symbolic. If any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And the voice of deity in the Old Testament had declared, but this is the covenant I will make with them. I will put my laws into their hearts, and in their minds will I write them. Paul adds, let us consider one another to provoke unto love and good works. The race ever since has been trying to catch the force of this new motive in life, but its efforts has been largely stupefied by its blind ignorance since the 3rd century of an evolutionary status and the endowment of man. A knowledge of the problem and the vital elements involved is indispensable to the proper direction of effort to avoid abortive outcome. So propriety writes, in the first place, indeed, it is necessary that he who intends to acquire this purification, that is by philosophy, should, as the foundation and base of it, know himself to be a soul bound in a foreign thing, that is in a body. You've got to come to recognition that you have the body, and the body seeks what it wants, you see, and a different essence. The intellectual base of all wisdom is the knowledge that we are souls, or fragments of God's own fiery life, inhabiting the bodies of earth's highest animals. This is the starting point of all wisdom, sanity, and religion. But our knowledge must be clarified in respect to another large item in the situation. We must not suppose, as theology has seemed to indicate, that the Christ principle came to the animal race in the exercise of his godly powers at their height. Far from it. Another law of life operates here, you see. The clue to it is found in John's grain of corn that must die to regenerate the species, and in Daniel's stump left in the ground to start a new tree. It's all of this whole thing of seed and tree are immense, what I would call allegory, but they're showing something to do with truth. These symbols point to the fact that in them, the renewal of the whole ancient life of their parent organization is potential. The soul, be it known, has been manifestation before. It has built up a long series of previous embodiments. Yeah. And with each such expression is gained expansion of its latent nature. It has never ceased to swing through its cycles, passing from embodied actuality to latency and seed and back again endlessly. But the important matter is to know that it begins each successive cycle at the point of first departure. It starts each round from the seed. He's talking about what I call reincarnation here. This does not leave us to hold the depressing belief that we go on repeating the same cycle each time. For this would break the heart and crush the hope of humanity. Nature deposits her gains from each period of growth in the seed, and through the organic life begins at bottom each time. The new seed of each round starts with a potential higher endowment, more quickly recapitulates all its previous stage of development, and arrives at the point where new progress can be made in the cycle at hand. We've talked with Phil Langdon about this. Basically, what happens simply is most people begin to wake up and realize something around when they're 40 years old, if they're aware, and depending on how many times they reincarnated here. And from that time point, 40 years on up, then there's a chance of basically improving, becoming more and more realization of who we are and where we came from, you see. So the Christ comes to man at the beginning of the human era on earth, not in his adulthood, but as an infinite deity. The baby God, he is a divine, but in potentiality, you see. We introduced this datum because of its profound implications for theology. It is the key to the comprehensive, a whole vast segment of theological meaning, which has remained obscured, meaning hidden, because of the decay of esoteric study. Its republication will lift a fair portion of the great blanket of superstition that is laying heavily upon the human mind in the religious dogma. It is the key to two considerable phases of scriptural symbolism never understood by theologians. The initial danger in which the Christ or Messiahs were involved and their suffering and crucifixion. Any newborn life is in danger from the elements, you see. Enemies beset its tender resistance on every side. Its survival is precarious. Its strength and stamina are not yet effective. So the infinite Christ principle was beset with danger from the elementary nature. It begins to U-turn as a helpless infinite, you see, and deified possibility. Deity is present, but it is heavily involved in matter, not spirit, you see, very deep in sense. Furthermore, it is assailed at once by the powers of evil, which are just these elementary natures. The Greek mythologies, them in the two giant serpents that Hercules had to throttle while an infant in his cradle. It will do much to rationalize theology if it once understood on the authority of discerning scholarship that the much magnified powers of evil are nothing other than the trials and trends of the animal portion of our nature. They are at each issue with the interests of the soul, and there is a warfare, which, however, is to end in amity, A-M-I-T-Y. The Egyptians speak of them as the adversaries and the enemies of my father Osiris, in the words of Horus the Christ. Again, be it known, they are in the Old Testament, the 7 nations occupying Canaan, the people whom the God, G-O-D, lowercase, had to overcome and dispose of. Naturally, he could admit the Israelite children into the Holy Land of spiritual consciousness. It's not physical, it's spiritual here. It's not no spiritual holy land, a physical holy land they go into. It's all spiritual. This guy's brilliant, folks. Really brilliant. I like this guy immense. I wish I was around when he was here. Again, they are the 7 plagues of Egypt and the 7 devils that had to be expelled from Mary Magdalene. For they are always the characteristics of the 7-fold powers that build the forms in which life is embodied. And this is the feminine principle in ancient theology. In Greek mythology, they are the 7 beasts that Orpheus sues to docile by the music of his lyre. They are the 6 elementary forces taken as 7 when synthesized by the 7. I think it's somehow when you have 6 things like this, and then you have something that runs around like a ribbon, or so to speak. I'm just thinking of it that way. The threat to the life of Jesus from the side of Herod in the gospel is a poor reaction of the Egyptian story of the menace to the Hammerman, H-A-M-E-M-M-E-T, beings from the Herut reptile, another name for the great serpent APEC, or APEP. Scholars are not in disagreement as to the date of Herod's death in the year 4 BC. In astrological picturatically, the same evil power is drawn in the planisphere in the form of a great snake Hydra, H-Y-D-R-A, which is water, as a symbol or emblem of the lower life, whose head is directly under the feet of the Virgin as she holds the Christ child in her arms, ready to devour him if she should let him fall. The Hammermet being or innocents rejoice later that the serpent APAC had not eaten their eggs from the nest. All this typology means that the Christ spirit in animal man is at first in danger of being overborne or drowned out and swallowed up by the surging waves of the animal sensualities. Such a mishap is the most likely because the gentle Jesus nature comes into the body in order to stand in the breach and check and bridle the outflowing force of animal propensity. It therefore has to bear the full brunt of the attack from below. Hence, like the sheep in a wolf pack, it is clawed and lacerated, wounded and bleeding, bruised and suffering, and this gives us the picture of the Christ as one who was tortured and crucified. Theology has never been able to understand why he who came to be a victor, vanishing the powers of darkness, had to be mangled and disfigured. The answer at last is here. St. Paul gives us the rationale when he says that was in the beginning, so it is now. He that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the spirit. The lower self for long cycles crucified the higher. Who fails to see that Christ in man is crucified as long as a selfish animal assertiveness rules in the individual life. See, you have to put to death this animal within you. You must crucify him. While we keep the gentle Jesus standing outside the fast closed door, as the Christian hymn sings it, we keep him nailed on the cross of suffering instead of seeing him or seating him on the throne of our conscious rulership. See, people miss the whole point here. It's about higher consciousness too. The Bible, and I'm not talking about what it's talking about in New Age here, folks. That's not, this New Age is completely another lie. Okay? That's why I'm doing this in scriptures, okay? Because it is hidden. Only those people who are profane will never get this because they don't understand. But it's for those who have a desire for truth. It is only for those at this point. You see, it's not God being mean to anybody. It's basically people are still in their animal nature and they're not yet using their noggin. They don't think. You see, they want everything thrown at them and say, hey, Jesus is in my heart, such and such. You'll never go to hell, which is another creation of them to scare you. The hell is here on this planet. The Bible, particularly in the famous chapter in the suffering servant, that is Isaiah 53, puts this condition in beautiful language. He was bruised for our sins, wounded for our transgressions. He was smitten and afflicted, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. For he was led as a sheep to the slaughter, dumb before his persecutors, said Isaiah. His visage was so marred, more than any man, and his form more than the sons of men. Disfigured till he seemed a man no more. He formed out of the semblance of a man. And Gerald Massey, Massey, the great Egyptianist obviously, adds, this was Horus of the incarnation, the God in flesh in the imperfect human form, the type of voluntary sacrifice, the image of suffering, being an innocent little child, maimed in his lower members, marred in his visages, lame and blind and altogether imperfect, and not only crippled and deformed, but actually cut to pieces, dismembered, as in the case of Saravati, Sarasvati, Bacchus, Bacchus, and Osiris and other gods. Indeed, it is a fact never quoted that several of these most astute of the early church fathers, misled by these allegorical descriptions applying to an earthly man, Jesus, are actually on record as affirming that Jesus of Nazareth was not commonly and beautiful in features or figure, but was ugly and disformed, destined by cosmic and karmatic machinery to incarnate. The Deva intelligence, a bit unwillingly, we are told, made the adventure and entered the animal bodies. They despise not the virgin womb, a statement which can only secondarily be taken to be a reference to their repeated rebirth from mothers or saintly maidens, since its primary meaning is that they entered the womb of matter, always typed by feminine personage. They took upon themselves our nature, having linked their highly vibrated capacities with the nervous mechanism of our bodies. They became like unto us, seeing that they had become merged with us in person. In their sphere or plane, we are to strive to live and have our being. They gave up their freedom, that is repose and bliss of their imperial home, to enter the realm of a lower range of life, to be stripped of their radiant glory and at our low level. lived their own death, as the ancient phrase has it. Indeed, the body was called in archaic symbology their grave, their tomb, their mummy case, and the mummy figured this life and death. Their incarnation was likened to a burial and was commemorated as such as the autumn festivals of older religions, you see. They counted it not lost to be found in the form of a servant. They became the servants of evolution. They stooped to conquer, for they tenated with the lower, incarnating in bodies at all stages of development. This is the meaning of that verse in Isaiah 53, in which it said that the suffering servant had made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his deaths. Translated, having tried to maim the meaning by rendering the word deaths or incarnations in a simpler number. See the authorized version of the Bible. They announced that he who would be greatest in the spiritual kingdom must become the servant of all, even the least of these, that is, the sons of men. They ate with the outcasts and the sinners and the harlots. Finally, they came under the law, as Paul so often states. What law? This is a point of mighty significance for religion. The law dealt with here is the phase of an ancient wisdom that theology had discarded, but it is basic for all understanding. It is that great law that brings uninvolved, untested spiritual power into relation to matter in order to lead forth its hidden capacity to exercise against the resistance of the inertia of matter. The Greeks called it the kuklos, K-U-K-L-O-S, A-N-A-G-E-A-K-E-S, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it, Anglus, the cycle of necessity, or the wheel of birth and death. Well, Hinduism called it the law of karma. We might call it the law of evolution, which brings the positive or spiritual note, N-O-D-E, of cosmic polarity periodically into embodied relations with the negative or material note, N-O-D-E, for the regeneration of the hidden force of life. By his commands, we as souls came and will repeatedly come into the life of these bodies. Yeah, we will continue to reincarnate until we ascend, until we become enlightened. Okay? That's just the way it is. It's not meanness from God. It's just the way it works. You grow little by little. You see, you progress. Our entry into body is our death. For St. Paul says, when the command came home to me, sin sprang to life, and I died. D-I-E-D, past tense. The command that meant life proved death to me. And when the chimerious, innocent, or material contact came by the law into relation with flesh, they further came under the law, in the sense that incarnation subjected them to the laws of chemistry and physics, heat and cold, pleasure and pain, affecting the organism. The gods suffer mortal anguish, you see. In the following notable theosophical passage from Paul's epistle to the Greeks, IV, which would be chapter 4, we would ask the theologians, what other connotation could possibly describe the characterization of the souls as children than the ones positioned in this lecture? But I say that as long as the Her, H-E-I-R, is a child. He differs nothing from a bondservant, though he is Lord of all, but in under guardians and stewards until the day appointed of the Father. So we also, when we were children, were held in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of time was come, God sent forth his Son, that is collectively sons, S-O-N-S, born of a woman, born under the law, that he might redeem them that were under the law, that is the Gentiles, the sons of men, that they might receive the adoption of sons. And because you are sons, God sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father, so that thou art no longer a bondservant, but a son, and if a son, then an heir through God. Howbeit, at that time, not knowing God, ye were in bondage to them that by nature are no gods. But as then he that was born after the flesh persecuted him that was born after the Spirit, so also it is now. Christian theology can offer no excuse for having so utterly missed the meaning of its own ancient formations when Paul, the Platonius, had so clearly set forth the rudiments of truth in a passage like this. Our elaboration has supplied the comment necessary to carry enlightenment into the language he uses. However, it is impossible to refrain from dilating upon the straightforward correlation of our exegesis. Exegesis, simply, folks, is simply how they look at Scripture and how they interpret it. Okay, in Paul's utterance, in which he declares that until we humans have elevated our consciousness to the level of that of an indwelling God, we're still in bondage to them that by nature are no gods. We are still under the law, not yet in enjoyment of the liberty of the sons of God. Orthodox parties that scoff at students of ancient esotericism for predicating the existence of Parcedius elementary elementus, that is the elements, and nature spirits will find their attitude rebuked by Paul, who twice in his letter admonishes us that we fall not under the powers of the elementaries of the air and the elementaries of the earth. For the delicate innocence, when thrown into a dark veil of lethe or oblivion, is in the animal bodies, were in a very real danger of forgetting that they were divine by intrinsic nature and mistaking themselves for the animals into which circle the enchantments of the time cycle or cycle had converted them in incarnation. When we were given an animal's mind, we fell under the spell of forgetfulness. And as Polonius tells us, then it was we lost the memory that we sprang up of that divine estate, smitten with longing for the lower, that is, the wrap in love of it. We grew to depend entirely upon it, so that we swung as far away as we were able. This is for humankind knowledge of the first magnitude. It should enable us to align human conduct with the demands of racial problem. The term means and ends of which we cannot know until we envision the data of the sages. The ancients spoke of the Messiah, not as he who was born once in history, but as he who comes regularly and continuously, or in another phrase, he who comes periodically. Take a break right quick here. Christian ideology should well consider these phrases, where they state the forgotten truth of theology. The coming of Christ is to be thought of as a gradual growth of an element or faculty of consciousness and taking place over the whole extent of the human eon. So what happens here? He's talking about the gradual changing of your mind. Okay. He comes during the whole continuance of the cycle, a little at a time, a little each day, each year, incarnations, you see. He is not yet born in our hearts, for he is only in gestation in our bodies. His birth will occur when he is delivered from the flesh in his last confinement. Socrates declared that the true function of the philosophy was that of the midwife, for he presided at the birth of truth, its delivery from the confinements of ignorance. Paul writes that he suffers the pains of childbirth, pangs, I should say, pangs of childbirth, until Christ be formed within you. You see, that when we come here, folks, I'm going to just be straightforward. When we keep reincarnating here, and we are told when we go back where we were, what I call a staging ground, lack of a better word, we're told we have to go back here. And that's where sorrow happens, because we don't want to come back here, because this is a hard place, folks. It's a hard place for everybody. And you can see that very clearly around us today. It's very clear how man treats his fellow man, how those who are at the very top choose to take advantage of those at the bottom any way they can, you see. The greatest single truth, in fact, we're all blown away when we come here, when we come to realizations like, what place is this? This place is hell, folks. It's the underworld. Dog eat dog type of world, you see. The greatest single truth that a mortal man can realize is that his animal body is the matrix in which the Christ is being gestated for his Easter delivery. Humanity is mother to deity. The gentle Jesus speaks from the inner heart of our lives with that still small voice which is all too constantly drowned out by the rackettness of earthly distractions, which is where we basically, I'm seeing this, the lack of, we're not still. We are always, this is true of all of us, including me. We're always thinking of something else. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. We're never still. We're in fear. Most of us are. Only to the extent that humanity learns to heed that voice will it advance its position in the order of being. The ground has now been prepared for planting the first clear determination of the rationale of what is called cultural in the world. It can now be stated to be the gradual humanization of the lower animal portion of man, to let the ape and tiger die in our nature, and to convert the ferocity of the beast into the gentle and loving habitudes of the Christ in the essence of culture. To change a brute of a man into a gentleman is the purpose of human evolution. Jesus said he would give us power to tread down the serpent and the scorpion that is in the first part of the cycle, has stung his divinity into legal coma. See, coma means you forgot. You don't know who you are. The reference to serpents and scorpions can be understood only in connection with Egyptian myths and the legend of Scorpio in the zodiac, which stung Ra, the solar god, to death in the fall of the year, as the sun, symbol of our divinity, succumbs to a submergence of its power in the fall of the year. So the soul, our actual divinity, goes into obscuration of the intelligent light in the autumn of its incarnational cycle. In other words, meaning you're getting older in some ways here. You know, you older part of the deal here. Sorry about that. But for mankind in the mass, there is far more romantic sentimentality in idolizing the portraits of Jesus of Nazareth as a halo by its remoteness in time and its historical unreality, you see, than in curbing the animal nature of the drab drama of every day. You see, he's talking about how religion itself, Christianity is Roman as what sentimentality of the idols they created of Jesus of Nazareth. You see, which was never a living being on this planet. A dreamy idea is ever more alluring than any humdrum task, especially when involving self-control. In this particular disposition of human psychology is perhaps to be found one of the reasons why the early church fathers gave their fathers the man Jesus to supplant the Christos, Christos, in the heart and the solar deity of the myths. Nourished on the Jesus gospel for 16 centuries, now it's basically almost 17, pious faith has become weakened in its robust fortitude by a habit of dependence on a power allegedly localized in another man of flesh or in a wrath-like Holy Ghost outside the individual himself. And while the legend ruled the mass mind, the true doctrine of the immanence of Christhood, language, worship of externalization deity almost resents having the Christ linked too closely with our nature in commonplace expression on the plane of secular. I don't know what that word is. Utterance. It does not respond with spiritual fervor to the ancient Hindu concept of the divine influence as closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. Oh, it's Tantrins. I'm sorry, Tantrins. Sorry, Tawdriness. Sorry about that. It does not respond with spiritual fervor to the ancient Hindu concepts or conceptions of the divine influence as closer than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. Yet all traditions of the spiritual lore of the world point the mortal that, after aspiring sainthood and heroic concentration, has crusaded the world over in vain for the Holy Grail. The weary seeker found it in his own return home, broken, disputed it, in the cup which he offered, in plain unheroic sympathy to the beggar at his own doorstep. The lesson of these myths is indeed a mighty preachment to humanity. For eventually, after long delusion in pursuing the coveted divinity and distinct idealism, The heart finds that in tutoring the wild instincts of the animal self and putting an end to the persecution of the spiritual soul by the one born after the flesh, and giving freer play to the charitable nature of the Christos within. There is the what he's saying here simply is Christ is within you already. It's already there, but you don't realize that. No one knows that, folks. It's there, but you have to awaken it. There is the only true romance that life offers, and he would do well to keep keep flesh fresh, I should say, in mind. Paul's urgent reminder that the Christ is nowhere but within us. He is. Nature implanted the very self of the God deep within our own constitutions, like a seed in the soil, to make sure that we could never miss recognizing and cultivating it. Yet priestcraft, that's what it is, it's a craft, like witchcraft, has practically deadened that sense of recognition by supplanting the teaching of the Emmanuel presence with the personality of a historical man of flesh. But very clearly has C.G. Jung, Carl Jung, the eminent psychologist, seen and stated the lurking harm in this psychological subterfuge. The imitation Christ will forever have this disadvantage. We worship a man as a divine model. You get it? Did you get it here, what he just said here? It just struck my mind. The imitation Christ will forever have the disadvantages because we have made him a man. We worship a man as a divine model. Do you understand what they've done? What the church has done? What religion has done in this way? It's imitation. They've got you worshiping a man as being divine. They've continued to do not realize that Christ is already within you. In broadening the deepest meaning of life, and then out of sheer imitation, we forget to make real the profound meaning within ourselves. If I accept the fact that God is absolute and beyond all human experience, he leaves me cold. I do not affect him, nor does he affect me. But if I know, on the other hand, that God is a mighty activity within my own soul, as once I must concern myself with him, these are words of the weightiest import and require some courage in the speaking. They should be warmly welcomed, for they hold a possible hope for the awakening of a decadent spiritual sense and the salvation of the race from present evils. With all our voluminous Bible studies we have not yet even mentally caught the meaning of the light that comes to illuminate the darkness of every man. The little leaven, that is the little leaven of righteousness in the lump of an animal sense life, the tiny grain of a mustard seed in the earth, the money invested with the usherers, that is the users, in the real sense, the oil in the virgin's lamps, the gold in the fish's mouth. We have missed the day-to-day meaning of it all. We have so far abstracted the reference of the mythology and doctrinal structures from the plane of actual reverence that we have created for them a sort of detached compartment in some rarefied realm of our life called the supernatural, the magical, and the miraculous. We have associated religion with this remote area and left it without dynamic applicability to secular living, so that the sincere, intelligent segment of modern people in disgust and revulsion have rejected the whole of religion's presentation. Of course they have, as being irrational. Of course it's irrational. The product of an unenlightened and unreliable mystical tendency, and the concept of a supernatural element in life has been repudiated with pure, perhaps justifiable bitterness. You see, religion has turned off the whole idea, even trying to find the truth. Most people, they basically just turn it off. It's crazy. It's foolishness. Yet, you must look at it again in an esoteric perspective. It's not literal. Never was meant to be literal. Yet wisdom is needed here, a wisdom based on true knowledge of anthropology. For inconceivably strange and fanatic to the humanists, as much sound the declaration now to be pronounced, it must be decisively reaffirmed that the proper concern of true religion was and is and must ever be with just those repudiated elements, the supernatural, the magical, and the miraculous. For with the advent of the Christos into mortality, there was to introduce unto life a power distinctively higher order than from the limited vision of the Adamic man, of natural endowment only, was in every sense of the term supernatural. Quite literally, the natural man was linked with the light and life of being decidedly above his rank. Remember, his name was called Wonderful. His divine presence and influence was to astonish the lower man with the continued working of things that would seem miraculous to him. The healing of the wounds and infirmities of the self below by the interposition of his grace would appear to be no less than magic to him. Humanistic revolt against supernaturalism in religion is fully warranted as a rebound from a caricature and distorted theology. Ecclesiasticism must censor itself for the defection of secular support, but humanism and sheer human ethical culture are themselves to be reminded that they have erred no less egregiously and failing to see that their scorn of the supernatural is not justified. Their mistake has been in attacking the supernatural where it has been erroneously mislocated in the heavens and not affirming it when correctly localized in the spiritual spirit immediately within man. It's not in heaven. You see, the God spirit is not in heaven, folks. It's in your head. You see, it's within us. It's not outside of you, but it's within. It is idle to bagger about the correlated definition of the word. To be sure, it must be used in a distinctly relative sense, for in its broad sense, nothing in the whole realm of life can be super, beyond, or outside of nature, but surely in relation to the capacities of the animal nature that constitutes the human part of man. The life of the indwelling spirit is legitimately affirmed to be supernatural. Paul tells us that the first comes that which is natural when that which is spiritual in the order of unfoldment. Our task, as Plato said in Timaeus, is to bring the supernatural down into the plane of the natural and to wed the two together in the finality of a new union. The weaving together of mortal and immortal natures in the chart of our enterprise. Reverting in conclusion to our starting point, it may now be said that the restoration of religion to its primal basis in anthropology is the only likely mode of saving its institutes from the devastating attack of the left-wing radicals. That is, the latter can thus be made to see that no scheme or social or economic betterment, no matter how mechanically perfect it may seem to be, can operate to expect perfection so long as humanity is continuous ignorance of the terms of the life program, will remain in subjection to the motivations of the lower carnal mind, actuates to selfishness. This does not for an instant absolve us from the necessity of establishing a more economic order. And he's talking about economic such and such, trying to make things really nice here, which is part of socialism. That's what he's speaking of, which never gets it right. It never will. You see, because it's done by man, and man will always look out for himself, you see. The point is that it must be seen that such an aim cannot ignore, flout, much less destroy the program of the cultivation of true values in that area of life called religion and hope to succeed. The leftist leaders cannot be so blind as to miss the fact that life has essentially values on planes other than those of physical well-being, and that a philosophy must be twisted to falsify, which links the success of an economic system as man's merely physical level with the destruction of the culturalness of spiritual values, ultimately the hunger of life itself. The material has now been presented which will enable them to distinguish true from false appraisals in religion and to conserve the one while dropping the other. Religion seen again as based on anthropology, must be replaced by all parties on its ancient throne as the king of science. Philosophy is the meaning of life. And though it sounds almost blasphemous in the ears of the mechanicalistic age we live in, it must nevertheless be asserted courageously that ever an age that deifies mechanical genius will find it it a faculty to attempt to derive or devise a workable mechanism for the happy ordering of life, so long as it does not know what that life consists of and what it means. And religion is philosophy, or meaning emotionalized. The historical Jesus as a civilized influence has now been tried for some 16 centuries, you see. With weird irony, not only has it not in large measure elevated mankind in the West above early barbarians, but it has in fact been used as a cloak for the worst atrocities and inhumanities that history records. The foulest cruelties were perpetrated in the very name of the gentle Jesus, folks, the Nazarene. Yes, of course they have. The Catholics, all the killing of mankind because you didn't believe in such and such. Have a crucifix. You must kiss it, so to speak. All the wars. It behooves man in the West now to try the concept of indwelling Christ, the hope of our glory. Religion as sentimental merely will find acceptance with the economic radicals, but religion as anthropology must do so. After all, life is lived in consciousness. The localization of all reality is found there. Man's conscious or psychological reaction to life can be ignored only at the cost of fatality to the scheme with which so founds it. A Prince of Peace did bring his entry into the human heart and consciousness when man was fabricated. He's struggling to assert his lordship over the elements of consciousness, tumult, of blind energies of our animal childfulness or childishness. The destiny of humanity for weal, W-E-A-L, or woe, is enrolled into the fabric, into the interwoven living powers. As needful as it is technical knowledge to an engine who has a complicated mechanism to handle. In their exhortation to mankind of the body of the ancient theology, the knowledge concerning the deity that it linked with our physical forms. The impending fate of civilization hangs upon the answer we give to the question, can it be restored in time to save the West from another plunge into centuries of spiritual darkness? Apparently so far have we failed to raise the brute to mankind that the only criterion of advance of the present epoch over medieval inhumanity would seem to be the substitution of the machine gun and poison gas for the most gentle rack and the Iron Maiden. All the while, our Savior is at our elbow, but so long as we look externally for his benign ministrations, we shall not be able to give effect to his miraculous efficacy, in healing the imperfections of our nature. The stability of human society was in olden times, and again must be grounded on knowledge that dripped deep within us for a truly superhuman agency, a seed portion of eternal being, which will link us securely with imperishable reality. This deified presence has promised that he will guide us into all truth, and in association with him we shall find that his ways are ways of pleasantness, and all his paths are peace. So that's the conclusion. Sorry I had some issues with this tonight reading it. This particular, where I'm reading this is actually certain words are not congruent, so to speak, what I mean. And what has happened is simply they've externalized Christ. They external God. They put him on the outside, you see. And when they do that, they put him on the outside, you no longer are able to understand that you're seen as bad. You're all this. You see, this is what I'm trying to say. You're seen this way all the time in your life, and it's been driven to me in my own life. When I went to certain churches, it was all about shame, such and such. I went to the last churches which were Presbyterian, which was John Calvin's particular background, and he saw men as basically as worms into the eyes of the God. So what I'm trying to say simply is they're teaching the depravity of man so badly that man is incapable of doing anything. You see, they give people no hope. You see, they're telling you man is like a worm. He's not worthy of anything. Do you follow what I'm saying here? They have obfuscation, meaning they've covered the truth up, which in reality, they never knew the truth because they were false teachers, you see? And so people was like, for example, we know that simply even Martin Luther, this was propounded to him. He would actually whip himself when he quote unquote sinned. He thought he was sinning outward, and he would just hit himself consciously. In fact, he would beat himself to basically knock himself out unconsciously. See, he believed in all that stuff. And I'm not saying Luther never came to the truth, neither. Neither Calvin and Luther came. They just created their churches, another system. I consider that Catholicism was the main branch of Christianity, so to speak, and then you had three groups actually. You had the Anabaptists, you had the Lutherans, and you had John Calvin. There are three major stems of that, so to speak. And basically, the Anabaptists became what I call the radical part of Christianity, and which was actually condemned by all three groups, the Lutherans and the Calvinists and also the Catholics. They all sought to murder these people. I'm not saying the Anabaptists had it right. They didn't have it right neither. But again, you notice that these wars took place against other groups, that they didn't want them to have a different perspective, you see. So this is my conclusion. Again, the point simply is that Jesus is already here. Christ is within you. You see, it's always there. You just have to find him. He's not outside of you. You see, this is what they did with the God-man, the Jesus. They put him on a cross, so to speak. And you see, but this is amazing. The story, esoterically, you see, many people say, well, the Bible's not telling the truth. No, the Bible is telling the truth. The problem is simply is we don't have eyes to see it. We're not looking at it in the spiritual terms. We're not looking at esoteric. We're looking at it in a X deal. We're looking at it, what I would call, it must have been a real Jesus back then. There must have been real, these must have been real Jews and Gentiles, such and such, you see. No, that's not what it's referring to. And so many people see that because that's what's propagated at churches everywhere. There's no church that teaches truth. There aren't. But the Bible itself does reveal truth. But it only is when you begin to search these things out deeply. And there have been others that have done this in what I would call certain occulted works. And what I call simply is that the non-Hammadic scriptures have pointed out different things, you see. So it's amazing how people, you see, this is the sad part. And the sad part simply is that people, it's just part of growth. I grew up in churches that preached hell and damnation. And I was a child, you see, and I bought into that stuff for over 40 years of my life. And it's just, you finally begin to see, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. And wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Why would God punish his own people? Wait a minute. If God is loving, you see, this is oxymoron state. If God is loving and yet he's going to punish you, there's something wrong with this. Okay. And it's all, it's a Goodman here says, so Joan Tell says that basically it's a fear factor. Yeah, it's all fear. This whole planet is all fear. Everything around us about is fear. To keep people, fear freezes people. It just basically locks them in. Okay, whatever you say, I'll do. Okay, all right. You only bow 15 times, I'll bow. All this, so it's about fear. And the whole idea of the connotation of hell. Hell was invented also back in the early part, probably 200s and 300s also, to bring in that. So we're going to go to hell. When the reality simply, this planet itself is a lower part, meaning simply is like hell, because for man, it is working, actually trying to find the truth, you see, and almost, and it's not to be critical. We all are in that stage. It's just about learning. We all are foolish when we're here. Many times, most people, they learn very few things. Yeah, the teachings of Christ are completely, but that's what, this is the esoteric perspective. And this is a guy who is, he looked at scripture esoterically. And you know, he's not well known. He was a philosopher, you see, by Alvin Boyd Kuhn. He's also a occultist, and he learned these things. But he also read mythology. You see, mythology has a lot of truth within it, that type of thing. And most people just bypass. Oh, it's just a tale. It's just a tale. Okay, it's just a tale. You know, and you'll notice that certain stories, has what I call, as a gentleman named Phil Langdon points out, that what we call metaphysics. And metaphysics is to do with the Trinity. It means three. You see, three. And we have the three bears. We have the three pigs. These stories, the three bears stories, is also to do with the soup. That one was hot, one was cold, and one was just right. You see, these are little stories to give to the children. Yeah, interesting. The 200 years prior to the Council of Nicaea are bankers. A lot of crafty shit going on with the canon. Yeah, I don't know if I used to think that. Part of it, I think, simply is that it's all esoteric. The scriptures are esoteric. There's nothing wrong with the scriptures. What they're doing is a hidden meaning in the Bible. In other words, if it was all messed up, as you're saying, the problem would be simply is that it's alchemy, it's mystery. It's basically what I would call simply is it's only for those who have eyes to see. You see, that's what this is about. It's for those only that has eyes to see, and it's not going to come to someone who is not genuinely searching for truth. It just will not. Why would it? Because they don't understand. Their mind hasn't developed in that regard. You see. So this is why, that's why, Paul speaks of children. Well, he's not speaking of physical children, but he's speaking of their mind. Their physical mind are not developed. They want milk. They can't handle meat. You see, this is kind of brilliant writing in some ways, because people who look on the outside, well, that don't make any sense. Of course, it doesn't make any sense. It's, again, like I said, for those who are simply looking for the hidden meaning or the esoteric, the hidden information, so to speak. And we've had some major things happen here in the last, less than 100 years. We've had simply is the non-Hammadi scriptures also. We found this. This was not supposed to be found, folks. Meaning that simply is that those in the past did everything they could do to basically keep people from getting into this, you see. And it was by the establishment, you see, because they wanted to rule, you see. Oh no, I agree. I believe there is a alchemy metaphor. Yeah, there's enormous stuff here. This is a multifaceted work, communicates on multiple levels of interpretation. This what you're explaining is the entire problem with biblical literalism. Yeah, I used to be in that whole thing. Yes, the whole thing's a scam. Correct. It is a scam. It is. It allows. Well, here's a question. Why do we have churches that take money from the parishioners? You see, uh, well, because the preachers within those congregations or priests benefit on that. They benefit on people who are completely blind. But the sad part is simply that, I guess the funny part is they themselves are blind. You see, they are blind themselves too. They're completely blind. They think they're doing God's work, and that's the truth. They really believe that, and they're in that type of mentality. They think they're doing God's work because they've been mentally, not spiritually blind. So they think this too. You see, those who have been taught in seminary such and such. And by the way, I have gone to seminary. You see, and I come under the rest basically after so many years being there. Come to the point. Guess what? This something's not right here. I don't want to teach something. I didn't want to be a pastor for sure. I wanted to teach church history. That was what I wanted to do, and that was my desire. But I come to the realization, guess what? I can't teach a lie, and I'm not going to make money off of it. I'm not going to deceive not only myself but others, you see. And that was over 20 years ago. And people, my friends at that time who, what are you doing? Like, I'm doing the right thing. Although it was a big decision in life to do that. See, that's we were talking about this yesterday with Phil Langdon. I suggested anyone who has interest in this to communicate with Phil Langdon. He's on YouTube. I've done like 8 or 9 conversations with him in the last month. And Phil Langdon, I feel like is someone who has experienced something far deeper than I have. And I haven't experienced what he has had. And he calls it simply ascension. And this all takes place here in your head. It's always been up here because these are signs that simply is that your lower members, well, that's to do with your other parts of your body, you see. And then this part up here, this is where you discern what is true and what is not. You're able to think for yourself. And most people, the sad factor is simply most people poo-poo the mind these days. They find, I want the emotions. I want such and such. So it's just sad. It's sad. Yeah, Langdon knows what he's talking about. Well, I know he knows what he's talking about because he's experienced the truth. I don't know if anybody else has experienced what he has. So I've like we're probably he's on a yesterday we did our last conversation on my channel discerning what is true and what will take place. He's going to be very busy in December. He'll start working, I guess, today or tomorrow, and he's going to be just completely busy at his job, so he won't be able to do any type of thing until January. So we'll probably do those, begin getting back into that in about a month. So, but he's the one who suggested me to read some of these particular works, and Alvin Boyd Kuhn is really a very brilliant guy, and nobody knows who he is. He actually self-published his works, which meant simply as no one really wanted to read his works because he was poo-poo. He wasn't of the social crowd. He died in 1962, as well as I recollect. So that was over 60 years ago. So yeah, I comment on your other video I found tonight about Kuhn. Yeah, yes, and he's also another guy, although I don't think I like yeah, he died in 63. Okay, I thought it was 62. Another guy that Phil Langdon suggested was a gentleman named Renee Swoller, who was a investigator of Egyptian typology and went there for over 15 years, him and his wife. But I told Phil I found that his works are dry. It doesn't mean I don't appreciate it, but it's more scientific. What I like about Kuhn is simply tends to be more logical in a lot of ways. So yes, yes, yes. What is it called? Off loop. You got. I don't know what that is. Yeah, I got all his works off of LIB Jim. I never heard of that. Oh, okay. You found my videos on Swoller. Okay, yes. Well, Swoller was condemned by most people who went to Egypt. He was considered a nut in their regard. And he had what I would call a different perspective. And his wife also was inspirational. She went with him, I should say. And she worked together for 15 years where they're at. Most didn't do that. Most may have stayed there for maybe a year or so, and they were gone. But he wanted to find out more deeper things. So Swoller is definitely that type of person. So him and his wife, and I don't know how they even survived, to be honest with you. I mean, what I'm saying simply is, yes, yeah, most people are labeled strange. Well, of course it is. Yes, most people could be considered strange when it doesn't fit in the accepted way of looking at things. And science and religion are basically the same thing. I mean, religion is simply this way of actually deceiving people, and now science, in a lot of ways, has become politically correct. So in reality, science that was what we call was supposed to basically save humanity, in reality simply has done the same thing. It is actually deceiving people also. So it's part of the two, as I would say, the two pillars type of thing in some ways. So yes. So I don't know how. Let's see, where are you at? Are you in England? Or are you here in the United States? Uh, yeah, science, the new religion, haha, is insanity. Yeah, yeah, definitely insanity. Oh, you're in Texas. Okay, great. So you're here in the United States. So in the future, we'll probably, and like I said, next month, not January, we'll be doing again some videos. And so maybe you can come and chime in with us as we talk about these things. Um, Also, there's a guy named Slanted Sleuth for the Truth, a guy named Steve. He's interviewed Phil Langdon quite a bit for the last few years, in fact. So if you would like to look into that, that'd be well worth all that. So that might be advantageous to you also, because this was done. Some of his videos go back. Well, see, Phil had his ascension in 2014. So this year we make it 9 years ago. And this guy named Steve's interviewed him, I know, at least for the last 6 or 7 years. So that would be something you might want to look into also. And there is another gentleman who interviewed him. I'm trying to think of his name. And he's in England. I think there was 3 or 4 videos he did. So this is, this is important in ways. I'm trying to think of his name. I can't think of his name. It'll come to me maybe a little later here. But he's in England. Um, he did some videos with Phil probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I'm thinking of. Um, and he asks a lot of details about what happened to him when he was um, in Angkor Wat. So so that's key. Um, if I come along with that, I'll just simply type it in here later on tonight. Unfortunately, this guy is not into what Phil Langdon's in, but he did do a interview, very good interviews, what I would say, with him. Meaning simply is that there wasn't any hate, so to speak. There were good questions that were asked by him. Yeah, it's cool. I just appreciate you sharing your resources. It is so helpful for those of us going into this stuff. Yes, this is all new. This is all radically new in the last 4 months for me, basically. I, I found out, I heard about him in 2020 and actually bought one of his books. And then I got involved in another particular group. I thought it might be something similar to that. And it's not, it wasn't. And I basically dropped myself from them about a year, probably almost 2 years ago. And I saw that simply as they were not saying they were bad, but I'm just saying simply they didn't have the noggin. Many people here are, as we talked about one time, me and Phil talked about, have gotten caught up what I call the Kundalini type of deal. And they've had some type of visitation with God within themselves. Yes, that's true. I'm not doubting that. The problem is simply is there's a 2 steps deal. And unfortunately, those people were not aware of that. You see, that's what's so sad. Yeah, yeah, you have to go with what resonates you with you. Correct. Yes, definitely. But what I'm saying simply is there are people out here that are saying they have the Kundalini event, and I don't doubt that. But he explains this. Phil explains it, and they give you the example of that. One of the things in the Catholic deal with the 2 keys. One is the gold key, and the other one's silver key. They're crossed like this, and there are 2 keys, and one is gold and one's silver. And he recognized that as being simply as the twofold part of the whole ascension deal. And people have the first part, but they failed not to get the second part. They don't seem to understand. They think that's all. They thought they got the whole deal, and it's not the whole deal. And there are many people who have done that. Um, there are many people who have done that, and they think that that's all they've done, and yet their lives don't change. You see, it's the same thing with Christianity. You know, you go in front of someone, da 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 da, and church, and you say, I want to be a Christian," and da da da. You want to be baptized, and in reality, simply is you think you're actually a Christian, and really you've been fooled. You've taken the bite of what you call the idea that simply is that you think you have the truth. We've all been fooled. If you don't think you've been fooled, you're not living real, because all of us have been fooled in one way or the other, no matter where, you see. And I talked to Phil. We've talked about simply questions like, what about Manny P. Hall? About him spiritually? Where was he at? And we've come to the realization. He has come to the realization. I agree with him that Manny P. Hall never ascended. He just was someone who had a lot of books. He wrote books. He was interested in spiritual things somewhat, but he never went any further than that. He was kind of a historian. In terms of ascension, all this is possible and it's accessible through a religious meditative practice and an open mind, of course. MPH was a wealth of, oh, of course he was. Manny P. Hall was wealth, I'm not saying a wealth of information, correct. But there are people who may think, he's a spiritual person when he never really went through ascension. And so is, um, what's his name? The American guy here in America. Oh, Walter Russell. Now, Walter Russell is also a brilliant man, enormously brilliant, had with many gifts, so to speak. But again, we talked about it. No, he did not have a spiritual ascension. He did not, um, and it's kind of sad. But these are great people, such and such, and Walter Russell is very important. You see, and uh, yeah, yeah. Of course, Russell knew better than even Tesla. Yeah, well, yes, I kind of proved that. And actually, Walter Russell was gifted with a brilliant mind, and he had a brilliant wife too. It's interesting if you ever read the story about that. He met his wife sometime, not his wife to be, because he was already married, and he was already kind of in that result, was not happy in that marriage. And when he met this woman from England, it changed his whole world because she was a lot like him. I wonder if is there such a thing as a um, see what you said. Russell vortex mathematics is paramount. Yes, yes. Well, he also speaks about what I call electric universe. Most people still poo-poo that idea. I'm trying to think his wife's name was Layla. I think it's not Layla. It's something starts with L. And this is one of the books he's written, New Concept of Man, so to speak. But I was involved in. I've been on this trek for a while. I was following Gurdjieff right 3.5 years ago. Also PJ Ouspensky and the Fourth Way, perspective. Um, but again, these were brilliant men. Again, yes, yes. I don't have his home courses, but I understand they're very super. Yes. Um, I was going to say something else. So Gurdjieff understood this simply. He understood part of psychology, and he was thinking about simply is getting the mind still. He understood, trying to understand that, but the only way he could understand it was that in his own mind was to basically keep people working so that their minds would continue to just think, and he was trying to do that, which didn't work. And so did PJ Ouspensky. PJ did something different. Ouspensky, they broke their ways, so to speak, the two of them. So yeah, if you want to do this, sometime we can do that. I can upload the courses PDF for you. Yes, think equals act of creation. Yes, yes, yes. So what part of Texas are you in? I'm in South Carolina. So I'm in the South just like you are. And tell me a little bit more about you if you want to do that. I'm gonna, yeah, it's about 10 o'clock. Wow, I didn't realize it was that late. But yeah, it's good to see you. I got 2 or 3 people here. Anybody else wants to ask some questions, are more than welcome to ask. It's roughly over 2 hours, but yeah, it's good to see you. Maybe when we get together, there's a couple. I talked to a couple people recently. We'll see what happens. There are 2 people in England who have interest in this also. Um, I like to I'd like to somehow, well, Phil's written books also, so we can always, that's something we might do. Also, go back into this. What do you see? What's being taught here? Phil's books are all free. If you want to download them, at his site, just go to Phil Langdon and his YouTube channel. You can download those books for free. Or if you want to have a personal copy, you can actually order it from Amazon. So you're north of Dallas. Okay, just a fellow intellectual soaking up all the available knowledge. Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, the beauty of the internet is right now. It's the opportunity that we have to talk with one another. That is, but there's so many people are confused. Here's one of the big things I think is key. If there are those who are quote unquote charging you for information, you need to stay away from them because that reveals their heart. If they're charging anything, whatever you want to call it, and Phil, like I said, is not charging. If you want a book, you can get a book, but you can actually download the books electronically. So he's not making any money. That's not his purpose. It hasn't been his purpose at all. So that's the whole idea. And so, yeah, they're charlatans. Yes, they're deceivers. They're in it for the buck, and that's that's kind of a big red flag to me. But it takes a few times you make mistakes, then you come to the realization, you know what, they're not the truth. They're not this such and such. And it's interesting that I think the Bible is the #1 book in the world. I don't know if it still is, and yet no one understands it. No one hardly understands it at all. You see. Yeah, yeah, good, good. Yeah, it talks about money changers. Yes, 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 money changers. Yeah, a lot of people get jobs, my friend, get jobs to make money to actually hurt others in some way. It's really sad. There are people who feel that that's what they need to do. And this, I don't mean it. I'm not talking about simply basic jobs. I'm talking about, people who actually harm their fellow man in many ways. Working in law enforcement, being brutal in that way, people who are involved in the medical establishment, all that, people who they just do harm to everybody. They do harm because they make money. You see. So I'm going to sign off here since it's over 2 hours here. Glad to have you here. Always, go to my channel, Discerning What Is True. I'm actually on Odyssey and also on my Facebook channel and also here on YouTube. And you're more than welcome to chime in. Yeah, it's by design. The Bible is an instrument of control that is aside from the teaching being subverted. Yes, correct. All right. Well, glad you came. Thank you for chiming in. And when you're in here again, such and such, and I'm doing a video, you're more than welcome to share your thoughts. Okay. All right. Good to see you. You have a good night. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.